our third webinar from the Anti-Imperialist Week of Struggle. We definitely thank you all for being here. It's going to be a very interesting conversation today. So in the recent days, the European region has witnessed a bit of a relaxation of all the social distancing measures in most of the countries. Some of the confinement measures have been loosened. In some places, even some school openings have happened. The stop on non-essential production has been lifted in some places as well. It seems that especially the fears of the negative consequences of the paralysis of economic activity is driving the governments to seek these ways to recover. And of course also for the elites in general, whether they're financial or business or political, they're all advocating a return to pre-crisis conditions quickly and completely as possible. Now, the coronavirus crisis has of course unveiled sort of facts and realities and shortcomings of this profit-driven world order. And while much of it has already been debated for a long time, rarely has the sort of capitalist inhumanity been more obvious. We need to ask ourselves lots of questions, and we need to find answers for them quickly, because the working people in Europe are bearing the brunt of this crisis already, and we need to know more about their situation, and we need to find solutions to this. The organizations that are calling for the Anti-Imperialist Week are beginning a new campaign leading up to and then also during May 1st under the hashtag We Sustain the World. I will post some information about this in the chat in a moment, but it's also this webinar that is under this heading. And I'm very, very happy to welcome Nerea Fernandez Cordero, who is a Spaniard in Ireland, who will be talking on migration workers, especially in the care sector. I'm happy to welcome Maurizio Coppola, who is from Potere al Popolo in Italy, who will speak about especially migrant farm work in the south of Italy, and surely also touch upon other places. And Olli Schröder of the European Left, who will speak to us about what has been the reaction of the European Union and what is there to evaluate, criticize, etc. In regards to the reaction of the European Union to this crisis. I want to say that we also had one more guest, Patrick Correa from the CGT in France. He sends his apologies. He is currently in negotiations around a company that is using the moment of corona crisis to shut down and move its production facilities to a different country. And so he is tied up in these negotiations, and he sends his regards. Before we get started, maybe a minor housekeeping issue. Please feel free to post questions in the chat. Please feel free to post comments in the chat. After the presentations by our speakers, we will definitely have an opportunity to ask some questions and debate some of the aspects of these presentations. Also, don't be surprised. Our technical people are able to mute and unmute you. We will not be using this function. We will try to keep everyone on mute and just communicate via the chat. And also this talk is being recorded just so that you are aware of it. Without further ado, I would say we start. And we start with Maurizio. Thank you for being here.
Okay, do you hear me? Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, thank you very much for inviting us and giving us the opportunity to talk here with you. My name is Maurizio Coppola. I'm from the political organization Power to the People, Potere al Popolo, in Italy, an organization that was born 2.5 years ago, and that is now growing and having much more grassroots activities all over the political and social topics, and also about in the migrant workers and communities we are working, and this is the topic I want to talk about also. And during this corona crisis time, we are having above all two kind of activities. This is first distributing food around migrant workers and communities that have problems now with the lockdown, with the loss of their jobs, or with the precarious condition they are living. So we are giving this direct support with food packages. And the second thing is that we are also supporting the unionizing the unions and the political organizations, above all in the south of Italy, in the fields where these migrant workers are working for the struggle of regularization, so for getting documents, but also for better salaries and better access to health and living health system and living conditions. So, as I said, I will talk about the situation of migrant workers in Italy and discussion above all of the regularization of undocumented migrant workers. In the past weeks of corona crisis, the topic is back on the political agenda of the Italian government because with the lockdown, in the rhetoric of the government, migrant work turned out to be essential for the functioning of the capitalist societies. In Italy, it rose above all in two sectors. The first is care work, and the second one is agricultural work. In terms of care work, Italy counts around 2 million care workers. That means people working as wage labor, cleaning and taking care about young and old people in private households. The vast majority are women, half of which comes from Eastern Europe. Around 900,000 of the care workers are formal care workers. Over 1 million are informal workers, most of them informal in the sense of working without a standard employment contract. And around 150,000 are undocumented migrant workers. With the corona crisis, a lot of those women lost their job and their accommodation also, because they used to live in the houses of the people they are working for. In the little emergency economic measures provided by the government, care workers with a formal employment contract are included, while informal and undocumented workers are totally excluded. The discussion is different for the agriculture sector. The Italian Minister of Agriculture quickly proposed the regularization of agricultural workers because the sector fell in a deep crisis with this arrival of the coronavirus. With the impossibility to circulate freely all over the country and from Eastern Europe countries into Italy, the sector has a lack of workforce. I remember that over 100,000 seasonal workers from Romania come to Italy every year, and that above all African migrant workers move from region to region following the different harvests, oranges, tomatoes, apples. So the free circulation of people is very important to provide the sector with workforce, and the coronavirus stopped this possibility. So the Employers Association estimates that 40% of the harvest risks to not be collected, fruits and vegetables missing in the supermarkets, and prices rising. The regularization of 200 undocumented migrant workers, as the government proposed, should have been a response to this situation. The government published a draft of the regularization project, but till now there are no concrete measures taken. The situation is produced by two main reasons. First, the pressure of the right-wing parties like Lega of Matteo Salvini and also Fratelli d'Italia of Giorgia Meloni, a neo-fascist political party. They want to force unemployed who lost their job because of the coronavirus and students to work in the fields in return of social welfare payments. So we have like a return or an acceleration kind of workfare measures workers because there are enough Italian workers available. The second situation producing this stop to concretize the regularization is that the economic crisis Italy is living is putting this subject in the background. Even if some exponents of the public social institutions are insisting on the regularization because, as they say, migrants are functional to the Italian economic system by paying social contributions into the welfare system, the government is not prioritizing this subject. So after 50 days of corona crisis, there is still nothing done for undocumented migrant workers, even if they are considered essential. We, as Potere al Popolo, highlighted three main problems around this political debate. The first problem is ideological. For the Minister of Agriculture, the reason to ask for political intervention and the regularization of undocumented migrants is to restart the economy and in particular the agricultural sector. We have always refused to enter into a logic that guarantees rights on the basis of utility for the productive system alone. Justice and rights cannot be tied to if and how much to produce. It still remains unclear if and how this regularization should be carried out. The government talked about the permit that is only valid for 6 months, and even if it allows to work, it cannot be converted in the residence and permanent work permit. It would therefore be a temporary regularization, a buffer operation that does not solve the problem of documents. The third problem is linked to the future perspective. The health emergency means that some issues emerge more clearly than in normal times, and that attempts are being made to find solutions to problems that had been there for decades. Patching up these problems without getting to the roots means that once the emergency is over, everything will return to normal. That means to informality, hunger wages, ghettos, denied rights. From our point of view, to solve the crisis of migrant work today means going to the roots of the problem. So this is first, for what concerns the agriculture work, we have to attack the share of produced wealth in the agri-food chain, regularize immediately undocumented migrant work, but at the same time, take away from food multinationals and large retailers to give to agriculture workers, Italians, seasonal migrants, but also undocumented migrants. So there has to be a redistribution of wealth inside of this agri-food chain. But the regularization of migrant work cannot be limited to the agricultural sector. As mentioned before, there is also the care sector, a lot of other sectors in which migrant workers are an important part of the workforce. We need to strengthen our position against neoliberal social policies and for the right of documents and social welfare for all. We are convinced that the conquest of the rights of the working class cannot exclude anyone, and that, on the contrary, without the advancement of the rights of the last element in this chain of exploitation, it will be difficult in the long term to defend and even conquer new rights for the entire working class. This is also the reason why we are supporting the unions in the south of Italy, trying to organize and trying to struggle for documents, but also for better wages, for access to healthcare system, and to access to houses, because they are now, of all the agriculture workers, they are still living in the ghettos around the fields, without warm water, without no access to the possibility to have social distancing, so really exposed to the problem of the diffusion of coronavirus. So we think these are the most important steps, immediate steps for strengthen the rights of the migrant workers. That means also strengthen the rights of all workers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maurizio. That was very helpful to understand the situation of migrant workers, especially for the agricultural sector. I believe similar conversations, or to an extent, similar conversations are happening in Germany, where there's worry about, I don't know, particular produce that will or will not be harvested in time. And suddenly it becomes very important to bring people to harvest, but not ensure their safety or their conditions or their wages, even, that they are appropriate. Thank you for that. Nerea, would you continue?
Sure. Hi, thanks a million for your invitation. Like, I'm really happy to be here today. And I'm Nerea Fernandez. I'm the co-chair of Izquierda Unida Exterior, with its migrant federation. Like, you know, like in Spain, we had economic crisis really like a few years ago, where it is still in that crisis, and now with the corona crisis is another one. And a lot of Spanish people had to forced to immigrate because there was no labor options there in Spain. So that's why 3 years ago, it's going to be our birthday, like a federation birthday, in a few days. So 3 years ago, loads of Spanish migrants who are abroad created this federation with the Izquierda Unida. And our work is push the Spanish immigration in the political table there in Spain, and fight for our rights as a migrant abroad. And a lot of like rights, like it's been taken from us, like the descendants law in Latin America, or for example here in Europe, like we have been doing this, like protecting Spanish workers abroad, like as we did in Holland. I don't know if you know the situation there in Holland, but as well, I'm going to talk about the migrants and the migrant workers. Like this is a really good highlight to talk. We had like we had this new, like a few years ago, that in Holland, like in this temporary agency works. They they hire like Spanish workers to go there in Holland, and taking the advantage of the economic and social situation of the southern countries to hire workers there in Holland. So like this like temporary agency, like workers have like these 0 contract hours. Like, you know, I think you know how it's the this contract is working. Like there's no minimum hours. Maybe a week you can work like 40 hours per week, but the next week you work 10 hours. So it means like you don't have a minimum wage. And the workers like live, as Marita says, with the migrant workers there in the agriculture sector. They live in camps, in tiny houses with no access to shops or like water or like basic accommodation. And in this temporary agency, like if you can't join an union, you can't break the contract, because otherwise you're fined with €3,000, and you have to pay to the company. So what we're doing in Izquierda Unida Exterior is like trying to put this in the Spanish government and the European Parliament as well. So that's kind of work like we're doing. And now with the corona crisis, we have seen that these kind of conditions are worse for the workers, because like there's no sanitary measures in these companies. People can't have the right to not to go to work, because you're forced to work, even though like the government says like you have to be, you know, like careful with this kind of things and coronavirus and everything, but you can't say no, otherwise you're being fired. And most as for example, as myself, like I'm a childcare worker, we've been seeing like in this crisis, for example, here in Ireland, you're not supposed to go to work if it's not essential, but I have to go to work, otherwise I'll be fired as well. And we've been seeing here in Ireland, like even though like there's some restrictions. Sometimes you can't have access to sanitary how to say well, like masks and everything, like this kind of things. So in the care section, like, you know, the care workers are most like migrant women, and this sector is reproductive, like it's taking the economy, it's sustaining the economy, and it's vital for the functionality of the system. And but it's most often is not regulated by the labor rights and the labor laws. The working conditions are like exempt for labor inspections and domestic workers. Like we don't have like contracts, and but that means like if you don't have a contract, you can't get welfare, you can't get a pension, or like labor inspections to check like your rights. We work like a lot of hours, we're overworking, and now in this crisis more, like I had a few calls by au pairs or nannies or childminders, like they were forcing to live in the au pairs live in the house already, but they're forced to live in the families' houses because otherwise they say that they were to someone coming in and out, but they need like the care for their children or the elderly people in the family. So this obviously is a lack of the rights as a workers, because if you don't go and live in the house, live in the house in this corona crisis, you might be fired, and you can't say no, otherwise you'll lose your job. And most of these jobs and works are not documented or with contracts, so you can't have access to the welfare or the under the payment like the governments, some governments are doing with this corona crisis. So you're completely with no protection at all, and you can't have the access to feed yourself, so that you're forced to work in this under these conditions. And we've been seeing like in the nursing homes as well, and the care workers and domestic workers and cleaning work, like it's completely undervalued, and it's the first sector to be hit by any austerity law or crisis, and most of them are driven by women. This thing means like we've been seeing like this in this times, like the people say like we're the heroes, essential workers, but that means like we're overworking all the time, we have no rights, and they're just like clapping won't change this kind of situation. And the reality is we're not gonna, I think we're like getting like completely under rights right now. And the thing is, as we as care workers, like we are exposed to the virus, even like we can say like, or we can't care by to ourselves, so we have to go and care by someone else. So with or without pandemic, we're forced to work long hours under precarious situations, and we can't stay at home and care for ourselves. So we have to go and care for others. Like in Spain, like some associations of domestic and care workers have denounced like the situation of the live-in domestic workers as well, like not only here in Ireland. Like as you have no rights and no contracts, you can't report it as well. So it's like completely a difficult situation for many of us. And there was here in Ireland as well, like not only like the undocumented workers or with no contracts, like in the childcare section, like more in the nursery home, with this in the start of the virus, like loads of crashes and child's school, they say they didn't want to pay the workers, while the government were doing like some measures for the schools. So here in Ireland, you can get a payment from the government to keep this kind of public and private schools, like they're all here in Ireland, that kind of things. But the companies were saying like they won't pay the workers, even though they were getting the payments from the government. And there was a crash in North Dublin, and they were on a strike for a few days, and they didn't leave the building until they got paid. But many of my friends or comrades here in Ireland, they're not getting, or they've been fired when their bosses are getting this payment. So I think this kind of situation, it's like everywhere where the companies are just taking the advantage of the coronavirus to get some payments from the government, but not paying their workers. And here, as the care and domestic sector, it means like we're like, for example, in Spain, there are more than 630,000 domestic workers, and they're undocumented. So like they have this kind of issue, like you can't report the situation, but you're forced to work more as you were working before. And here in Ireland, as for example, like if you don't get a contract, you can get the PPS number, which is like your social security number, and you have no right to ask for any payment. And we've been seeing like a lot of workers are in this situation right now, and a lot of them are trying to report this to social movements or political parties, but the governments are not doing anything to protect these kind of workers. And another workers that I can find are really a risk, I think, in Ireland and everywhere, is the delivery in the riders. I've been seeing this in these days, like this kind of workers, like in Amazon, they have been like hired like more than 80,000 workers right now in the coronavirus crisis, but they have no sanitary measures, and they're completely overworking, and because like people are getting stuck at home, and they're like ordering online more than before, and they're trying to do some strikes, but they are not receiving any support. Here in Ireland as well, frontline workers in Tesco or another shop, I don't remember, they were doing strikes as well, but public opinion are not supporting them as well. Like it's funny the way like everyone is clapping at 8 o'clock, but when the workers need support for the people, the public opinion, they're not getting anyone. And so most of like kind of like this is the situation in the most like the basic NHS workers were always migrant, and saying like in this kind of work where it's like everyone is agree like it's essential, and we need them or they need us. But on the face, like when you have to face some strikes from these sectors, people are just like not supporting at all. And I find like I'm finishing with this now. When in this system says like you're a hero or since you're working and we need you, it means like they're willing to sacrifice you because you're very easy to replace, and there's going to be more migrant workers coming, and poor people in the poor countries like coming to the richest countries to work. And this is kind of like all the system as always is doing, like essential workers mean like you're essential, but you don't have the rights and conditions like other workers have. And at the time, I think now loads of workers are seeing like they need to organize themselves, and that's what we're trying to do in the social movements, and more in my federation. We're trying to report and highlight these kind of issues, not only in the Spanish government, but in the European Parliament as well. So more or less this is what we're doing, and trying to get all the conflicts like the migrants or Spanish workers are facing abroad in this corona crisis. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much, Nuria, for your presentation. It seems that it's like the rights of the most vulnerable workers seem to be very much tied to citizenship rights, and especially where workers are invisible, for example, as you described in domestic care and cleaning work, a group that in its half legal status is, vulnerable at the best of times, or precarious at the best of times, seems to be is particularly hard hit in these situations. And that seems to go for like travel or movement within the European Union. So, or within Europe, whatever the European Union. Yeah. So we will hear about the European Union now. Ollie, please take it away, and let's hear.
Yeah, thank you very much, and hello to all the people in the chat, to the people in the seminar, and thank you, Franziska, for your very kind introduction. And my colleagues, spoke about the terrible situation of the weakest of society, and it's really important that we have to try to change the situation every day, every minute. And now I have to be very concentrated because it's a huge topic, and telling something in 10 minutes about the shortcomings of the European Union in these times. Well, so I will just concentrate, and maybe in the discussion you can add your comments, ask questions, have a good debate all together. So let me start with the conclusion that unfortunately the European Union is an institution of broken promises. I have to tell you, I'm coming from Germany. So when you know the balance sheet of Germany when it comes to history, so I don't want to have a strong national state. So a European Union would be something good. European integration, the idea itself, I like it very much. And when they started it with the Treaty of Rome in 1957, of course, there were other motivations too. For example, to control Germany and its military power, for instance. But one great motivation was to have solidarity among the member states and solidarity towards the working people. You can't believe it when you check the present European Union, but in the 57 document, there's written that the main aim is to improve the living conditions and the incomes of the working people. So, and now when we go to the present and looking at the last years, unfortunately, we have to say that the European Union failed to deal fairly in a solidaric way with Greece, Spain, Portugal, and Ireland. We always forget Ireland. The European Union failed to address the question of migration. They made a fortress out of Europe, and neglecting the lessons of the 20th century, neglecting the lessons of the Second World War. Imagine that. Hundreds of thousands of Jewish people fled from Europe in the 40s, not to be executed by the Nazis. And if there were no safe havens, what then? So I think it's a very easy conclusion to say Europe must be an open space for the human mankind. But they don't act on it. The opposite, they are closing the borders. Third poor topic, or third failure, they failed to give the youth and the workers a perspective. So, and the young people, especially in the Mediterranean countries, but also in Eastern Europe, they see their future betrayed by the European Union. And this even before the corona crisis. And as my colleagues made very clear, the poor people are suffering the most. So, and what is the European Union doing? Well, the EU, with the brilliant Ursula von der Leyen, I have to say that Jean-Claude Juncker, of course, it's not my glass of wine, him, as a politician, he's a conservative, but at least I think he was able. And when it comes to von der Leyen, we know her acting from the politics she had done in Germany. I'm not entirely sure. And the European Union was acting far too slow, far too discordant, and it's lacked to play the role of an anchor, to give the people a bit of, a mood that all European people are standing together to fight the virus. So opposite is the truth. It was just the national states who were acting. So it's obvious that there's no consensus on corona bonds. So my party, the European Left, we say that's false. We need to have corona bonds. And Germany, again, my country, unfortunately, the Dutch and others, the Austrians, they deny that. For wrong reasons, totally clear, but at least you can understand that by logic. But what I really don't understand is why the European Union didn't play a coordinating role in combating the crisis. For instance, giving funds immediately to the poorest of society. So they do have the budget, and the budget is not little. So what have they done so far? The activation of the general escape clause of the Stability and Growth Pact, I think in the Mediterranean countries more common as the Fiscal Compact, that is by far not enough. The whole pact must be cancelled, and the European Central Bank must play a key role to assume responsibility for economic development and, in the end, full employment. So therefore my party, Maurizio, you know Paulo Ferrero very good, even he is not member of your party, but I think you can live with his proposal that the European Central Bank should directly intervene. We propose that the European Union is creating a European Public Bank. This is possible legally on the basis of the not much like Lisbon Treaty, because there's a bullet point called the European Health Fund, and this European Public Bank should receive an initial loan of 1,000 billion euros from the European Central Bank. And this loan should this should be a 100-year term loan with a negative interest rate. The loan would be expandable by the European Central Bank, and the money should be spent for the overcoming of the catastrophe we are facing, for the bettering of the social situation of the European citizens, for the building up of the health sector, and to sustain income losses for the unemployed and the working poor. So when ultimately with this money we should invest towards an environmentally orientated economy. So that's very technical, sorry for that, but this is a concrete proposal how to give money to the people. Because what will be the situation after the crisis? The rich people will have get richer and the poor are poorer. And this is the main problem next to the environmental question. But even if we solve the green question, let's say, you will still have the nightmare of social inequality all over the planet. The social question will be the question of the next century. So, what is the conclusion? Of course, we have to say to the people, also of the political center, to say goodbye to the neoliberal capitalist system. Public goods must be in public hands. So the European Commission, they demanded from Italy, Spain, and Greece, especially Greece, to cut down the health sector. And what is happening? People are dying because there are not enough ventilators there. People are dying because not enough carers are in the hospital. So the capitalist, or at least the neoliberal capitalist system, has proved to be murderous. So, but I don't think that we should be very anti-capitalist, very loud, very, look, we have to convince the center of society too. We have to say them, well, in this crisis, what do we need? We need a good, working, functioning, well-funded state. And so we need that all public goods must be, well-equipped. So, and I think with this position, we can win over some more people to vote for the left parties or joining us in demonstrations. Of course, unfortunately, we can't have a big 1st of May demonstrations, and the situation we are having now, it's forcing us to be in the internet all the time. But of course, you can't win any fight only by the internet. So, but what is really important, we have to be on the spot ready when discussions on the conclusion crisis will be held in the parliaments and on the streets. And we as leftists, we have to say, well, we have to change the way we are living. So we can't go on with that. Capitalist system wasn't able to cope with the migrants, wasn't able to cope with the peace issue, and it's not able to deal with the corona. We need to have something like a third way. So, and one last word, maybe to be a bit optimistic as well. So, of course, you have to analyze every single country individually, but I do see a trend that the real white people, not the bourgeois people, but the xenophobic white, they are currently proving for not being able to address crisis situations. Take a look to Brazil, take a look to the United States, but even to Hungary. So I think one lesson is, and almost all people understood, that we do have global problems which need to be addressed internationally, globally. So when the story of a strong leader going forward, no matter what's happening, they are weakened by the coronavirus. At least I hope so. So society, politicians, scientists, they all need to work hand in hand to provide good societies or good possibilities for the people. So, you know, the European left is a combination of more than 30 European parties. Some are bigger, some are smaller, but in the end, we are not the biggest factor in European politics right now. Of course, we want to change that, but we are totally convinced that we can't change that just by being political parties. We need to have a closer connection to the people, to the movements, and yeah, let's start it all together. It's not changing. World is not changing just on the ballot. So thank you.
Thank you, Ollie. Thank you very much. Before we go into questions, I'd like to pick something up that Ollie said about the 1st of May, when he was saying that it's difficult this year since there will be no big demonstrations, that we cannot show the force of the working class the way we like to do on the 1st of May. The Anti-Imperialist Week is asking, as I said already, that is asking for a campaign, or is starting a new campaign under the hashtag We Sustain the World. And there's also a call for videos, so that we can, even though no battles are perhaps won on the internet, I think actually getting to the bottom of, you know, who is sustaining the world and who is to be held responsible for this crisis, that level of education can be done over the internet. And I think we've seen quite a few very interesting campaigns. We have previously here talked about sanctions, and I think there has been interesting developments there, where the recognition of what is really happening in the world, and for example, what sanctions really are, has been improving the general conceptions of sanctions as war measures, and has brought people over to our side of the anti-imperialist camp of understanding that sanctions are not an option. And I think similar things can be done around understanding, well, who profits from this crisis, or who bears the brunt of this crisis, and that we are, for example, not just talking about a health crisis, but about a crisis of capitalism and of a profit-driven world order. So I'll post that call to videos in the chat as well. And I would like to ask all the participants that have listened to these 3 presentations to talk, raise their questions in the chat, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, so I had a few already pings, like questions. One of them was addressed to Nerea, where the question came up: what is the role of unions in this sector? Like, is there actually a sense that, I don't know, unions are supporting the efforts? I know you mentioned that there's efforts of organizing, which I, of course, believe is very, very difficult. I think this is a common experience, that organizing people who are as invisible as care and cleaning workers and domestic workers, etc., is incredibly difficult. But there was a question from someone here asking about the role of the unions and what type of organizing you are actually managing to do under the current circumstances. So if you want to take that, that would be cool.
Sure. Here, like, for example, I know more about Ireland, of course, but there's first step of the, I don't know if you heard about the Kelly workers, where it's like the cleaners in the hotels. They're trying to do an international union, international European, union for the cleaners, and to try to put like their highlights and try to protect their work. And here in Ireland, like a few months ago, we had a childcare union for the first time in the country, but it's only for early years educator, not for childminders. But I think it's good to have these first steps, and I know like au pairs as well are trying. Well, I was an au pair as well, and when I was living in Germany, actually, I lived in Germany 1 year, and we were trying to do like a European au pairs union, just to not like to get organized as a trade union, but to try to help each other and like trying to focus on the conflicts like au pairs are facing and that kind of things. And about childminders and everything like that. I think here in Ireland, with the biggest start with it's like this trade union for child workers, we're trying to open that trade union for childminders as well, and not only early years educator. But the thing is, as like most of this work, where it's completely undervalued and precarious, it's difficult to just join all together, because most of us have no contracts and we are not protected. So, but like many of us are trying to, not force of course, but like push these kind of things, like for us, just like here in Ireland, like there's loads of domestic workers and childminders, and we're trying to do here like and hopefully to do like an European union. I know like it's going to be very soon how is it, like an action plan for the integration of this kind of things, and I think they're trying to do like this a migrant woman network, and they're based in Brussels, and they're trying to do this new proposed fact about migration and asylum seekers who are actually working as domestic workers. So I think we're there in the step, we're on the way. It's a bit harsh just because like our work is completely invisible, and people are trying to underskill our work, and but it's like completely fine to work as a domestic worker or cleaner or childminder. But what we're only trying to do is have the right to have a pension, to have sick leave, maternity leave, or all these kind of things like with the labor rights. We don't have that kind of like work rights right now. But I think it's coming to the step to create a union. I hear in Ireland, for example, with the big start, and hopefully an European movement with childminders and domestic workers and the care sector, because like we're seeing with this coronacrisis, like we are still working, even though like all the people are just trying to work it at home. We can't do that, and it seems like it's a really important sector, but I don't know how it's going to be in the end, but like we're there.
Yeah, thank you. One second. So another question is being raised around what has been called, I think also you mentioned it, Nerea, around company handouts, like the idea that companies are receiving bailout money, et cetera, but it doesn't actually arrive in the workers' pockets. There's questions around that, about like where and how is there a possibility for organizations, or how can we control these types of things? It's not necessarily for you, Nerea. Maybe Mauricio also wants to talk about this, but it's a question that came up in the chat. Like, how do we ensure that the measures that are taken, that are little anyways, that are like not enough, as Maurizio also points out, you know, the Italian government hasn't even managed to guarantee and ensure all the promises that they made. So what kind of might or power do we have to ensure that at least the little that is being promised actually comes to us? Sorry, can you hear me? I think my internet connection is bad.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to answer, Maurizio, or
go for it? I can after
okay.
you.
as far as I know, the trade unions are like reporting this kind of issues and trying to complete all the conflicts like the workers are facing. I don't know how it's like actually, even here in the government knows about this crash, like that they're taking the payment, but they're not paying workers. But they're not doing anything right now. It's like there's a lot of like this crisis is like they're trying to focus on other stuff first. But as I know, like the trade unions are trying to put this in the highlights, and there's a lot of workers reporting labor abuse or being fired when the school has the payment. At the moment, they're just trying to compile all these conflicts, and I think like very soon it's gonna like be reported, like, and trying to investigate what's going on, and as far as I know, here in Ireland.
Thank you.
Yes, for Italy, I mean, there is really not so much done now for for the working class people, and the few measures taken, economic measures taken for the working class people, there is a huge bureaucracy for acceding also to this public money for supporting workless and unemployed people. People lost their job because of this situation, but also independent workers, they have the right to access to some money, 600 euro, 800 euro in 1 or 2 months. And there is, well, there is a huge bureaucracy. Even yesterday, the Prime Minister Conte said that Italy now is able to be very fast on assuring the access to this money, but it's not at all the case. I mean, we know a lot of people that they have not this possibility. And what we can do is putting public pressure on these topics, and we are doing this as Potere al Popolo with what we call the red phone. So we just have like a telephone line. Working people can call on this phone, and we collect all these issues, all these conflicts people are living in the workplace. It's not only conflicts caused by the lack of money received by the state, but also the security measures into the companies, into the factories that are not guaranteed. And we are trying to document this and to put pressure on public pressure on the companies, but also to put pressure on the politics, on the government, with letters we write, with public denunciation we are making. And this is something that is really going more or less good, in the sense that a lot of people are not seeing in the big unions the organization they can follow for having guaranteed these rights, because the big unions, they are just also signing the agreements with the government and with the companies for the security measures and so on, but it is not enough. So they look for new forms of organization, they look for new forms of supporting, and this is something that is coming from above. This is something that is coming from like a new political subject. And so that we have like over 30-40 calls every day from people all over Italy with such problems. And this is something we try to strengthen and to put forward, also not only for giving immediate support to these people for their immediate demands, but also for organizing in struggles, organizing on a longer term, for having also really a strong working groups of workers also in the companies for defending their rights.
Thank you. Yeah, especially the measure with like actually having something like a hotline, or what you call a phone, red phone, is something that we've also learned about from India, from our comrades from the CPIM. So that's also very interesting, that like sometimes it is that very, very concrete support that is necessary. We have lost Olli. He is, the internet in Germany is not so great sometimes. So he is lost to us for now, but he's trying to rejoin, and hopefully he can make it In the meantime, I'll read another question from the chat. Could the participants discuss what strategies they envision for combating the extreme right from taking advantage of popular discontent in a deep and continuing economic crisis, whilst also trying to resist the capitalist sector attempt to re-establish the neoliberal model and weaken the working class struggle to protect their rights? I believe that fits very well, because we've already addressed, like, addressing issues of citizenship, which are a huge problem, which leave people the most vulnerable, are only getting, like, under this xenophobic, right-wing, nationalistic approach of the more right-wing parties, as Maurizio was explaining, is only getting worse. How do we, and I personally actually had a similar question, like, how do we actually keep this level of organizing and to an extent social cohesion? How do we, like, channel that in a way that we resist the right-wing attacks, but also the idea of, oh, let's just, like, let's go back to normal, because somehow that is better and safer. How do we do that?
Go for it, Maria.
Okay.
Who wants to take this incredibly difficult question that cannot possibly be answered?
It is difficult. I would love to know, but I think I've been seeing, like, a change in the public opinion about the workers' rights. A little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. So I think now, like, what we have to do, not only in the public opinion, but with the workers, is trying to get the workers to join the unions, because they're seeing, like, their rights are getting, like, in really difficult times, more like most of the Shinsen workers. And for the migrant workers, and we're seeing as well, like, sometimes I think we don't have this conscience about our working class recognition. And I think now that can change if we can lead to the way as the lefty parties. And I think we're taking that highlight and put it in all the media, and where it's important. Like, I know internet is not only all work, but it's important to win this kind of arguments and all the media, because there's a lot of people who has access to Twitter, Instagram, and whatever, and a lot of people are trying to teach themselves about what's going on and what the issue here. And I think we're trying to focus on the rights and workers and this kind of things. And as we're seeing about the swing right, for example, as Maurizio was saying about the agriculture workers here in Ireland, actually a few days ago, there's this company, Keeley's, I don't know if I'm saying it right, they're fruit pickers. As they don't hire people here in Ireland because no one wants to do that job. They flashed a plane to Bulgaria to get workers and coming back here to Ireland with no sanitary measures and with no any protective measures with the coronavirus. So when that was in the news, like, most of the people were saying, like, first of all, it's very risky, but second of all, why do we have to go and pick workers in Bulgaria as we are here in Ireland? So people were facing like this. Maybe the agriculture worker is really bad pay and bad conditions, and they're like very precarious conditions. So no one here in Ireland were asking themselves that until we had this thing a few days ago. And with the screenwriter, they were saying, like, of course, like, migrants people coming to steal our job. And in the public opinion, we're like, no, they're the victims here, because, like, they're risking their lives. They have to come here to work when no one wants that kind of work. And so I think something is changing, but the main important for us as the lefty party is talk to the workers join the union and trying to put all the measures to protect people and to see like it's us who are sustaining the war. Like in Spain, for example, as we have the progressive government, and I know not all the countries has a socialist lefty government. But what they're trying to do is push like economic measures to protect workers and to don't leave like no one behind. Like so, and I think that's our main job. Like just trying to see like we're trying to protect workers and like we won. So, and I think that's more or less what we have to do as the left.
Yeah, I can maybe add some points we are doing concretely. I mean, I can bring a concrete example. It is in the airport of Naples, there are around 400 people working as seasonal workers. And now with the corona crisis and the crash of tourism, they are no more needed. And so now they are excluded from working, but also excluded from social welfare because they are seasonal workers. They were not being integrated in the social measures the government decided. They were not the unemployment payments. They were just they finished because they are seasonal workers. So they are like lost in nowhere, and they are also lost in nowhere what concerns the unions and political organizations defending their rights. And so what we are trying to do, and it was possible with the red phone also with this hotline they called, is that to bring out of the company, out of the workplace, their demands, the problems, and to politicize these problems, and to show very clear where the problem is, so that, for example, the working contracts they are precarious, so it is not possible. We have to develop such demands that such contracts are not responding to the social needs of the people, and so on and so on. So really to politicize and to bring outside of the workplace the demands, so that you really catch the social issue of such conflicts, and you do not leave the ground on the right-wing parties, because it is clear that the right-wing parties now are on the opposition. They always will show that the problem is the government, and so they try to play with the wave that brings them to the government. But it is clear that they will not make social programs for this kind of workers. So you really have to try to be like a social and a political orientation and expression of such demands. And it is not only linked to the people, now they lost their job and you bring like these demands outside of the workplace, but also in the neighborhoods. We think this is also one of the most important way to be near to the people, to be there and help them in their everyday social problems without they are not able to pay food, so you have to in a way or another collect food for bringing them this food, but not only to give them, like to make a social activity, but to try to politicize also this kind of social work. So it is a really a very difficult work to make, because it is all over the social places. People are now moving and living with this crisis, but this is really necessary not to leave the ground to the right-wing propaganda, because at this time the right-wing, they are well, above all in the south. In the north it's a little bit different. Also right-wing organizations are bringing food in the neighborhoods where Italians live, but you really have to show that there is like the same material condition between Italian working people and foreigners and migrants, for example, and bringing them together like with political demands. It is a hard task. It is not something easy, but it is the only way. You have really to be deep inside these social dynamics.
Cool. Thank you. Nuwan, please, if you have a question, ask in the chat, and then we can hopefully address this question. The chat is at the bottom of your screen. You will find the window to open and then ask. Hi to you all. I'm a Spanish migrant working from the Danish Parliament in Copenhagen. I'm currently working with small political parties in East Africa. Working rights in this region are close to non-existent, especially during the coronavirus crisis. The risk of starvation is the most concerning issue in the political debate these days. How can the progressive forces of the European Union support the African working class these days? Thanks. I think that's a very important and interesting point, which is something that we have seen and has been commented on here, even by people like Olli, but also by Maurizio and Nerea, about how inward-looking, due to the crisis, how inward-looking some countries have become very, very quickly. And I think that lots of us, or at least I have noticed that, for example, the German general news channels and German news TV spends zero time on places outside of Europe, except maybe for the US or China for entirely different reasons, to actually talk about what the corona virus crisis is doing in other places. So I think that this is a very difficult question, but I think it is one that we, as anti-imperialists and as anti-imperialists and as internationalists, actually have to ask ourselves, and we need to not forget our international obligations or our solidarity with other people beyond Europe. So I don't know if you want to comment on this. If you want to, please go.
Yeah, just like it's a really good question, but I think it's really important to keep with our internationalism and to build more networks. I think, like, as for example this talk, and we're like from different countries and different backgrounds, but it's great in my opinion to do these kind of things, because first, like, we know each other, and second, we can build like more networks within the lefty political parties. So that's like, for example, like the other day, like, we were having like chat with people from Bolivia, and they were talking about the coup d'etat there in Bolivia, and all the things like it's going on. And I think as we as the left, we have to work on internationalism and trying to be together and support each other, and because we don't know what all the things that is going on all the time. So that's why I think we should get in contact and do this kind of things, like as you're doing in the Anti-Imperialism Week, which it's brilliant. I think we need this kind of talks and debates and keep in touch with each other, because it's actually as well political work, and with to support the African working class. I'll really like.
Oh. Did we lose Nerea?
Yeah.
We may have lost Nerea, but we have Olli back. So I guess there is, sometimes you just can't have everything. Hi, Olli. Good to see that you are back. We're coming to the, we just lost Nerea. I hope that she will be able to join again in a second. We're already coming to the last questions, because I think we're already extending our time a little. I think we should sort of finish up soon. I hope that you can hear us, Olli. I find that there's a very interesting question from Alicia. She raises a couple of them. Some of them are very concrete, but then I think, so I'll read it out. In your opinion, which actions should governments take to support the public services? And also, which actions should they take to promote public services versus private services? And after all this crisis, and we know now that public services are essential, will governments recall this when the outbreak will be over? And I think this is to me, that seems like a very philosophical, very good last question, because whether the governments will remember that services are essential once this is all over is really, I think, will, for example, depend a lot on which government we are talking about and who is taking advantage of the political situation. I do want I think at this point it's only Maurizio left. I don't know, Maurizio, if you want to answer these complicated, and again, these very, on the one hand, concrete, but very, very complicated questions.
I just also wanted to add something on the other question, because I think it's very important to highlight the role of European companies in Africa. And above all, also in Italy, we have a lot of these topics, and we try to make political campaigns, for example, against the role of the Enel, the energy industry in Libya, where there is a war going on since years. And the Italian companies, they are, the Italian government is protecting the interests of these companies in these countries, and they are really trying to have a role also in this war situation. But we have also good responses on, like working class responses on that, and we have to start from this. For example, the port workers, the harbor workers from Genoa, they also made strikes against the ship coming with war material from the United States going to Turkey, and in Turkey they use it for bombing the Kurdish people in Syria and so on. So we have really to highlight this kind of struggles of the working class and try to really multiplicate this kind of struggles all over the world, for showing that the working class is linked internationally, and that also Italian working class can make something against the exploitation and the war situations in these countries. For what concerns the question on public and private, I think that in Italy, for example, the Italian government just introduced a task force for thinking. There are 70 people, 70 experts working on how to go over to the second phase, second period of coronavirus, for opening the industry again and so on. And there are also like positions from Keynesian point of view, and they are saying that the state has to take again a role back in the industry for a sustainable economical development, and the state has really to have a strong role to indicate companies how to act. And for example, the example is taken that the state should give the money to the companies that guarantee green economy, or that the money from the state should go to the companies that are not outside of Italy or in a fiscal paradise. So I think these are like little steps from a very center-left point of view, that even inside of the European bourgeoisie now is discussed for strengthen the national capital and the national position of the companies in Europe and in the world. But I do not think that at the end the state can guarantee in this time that the money is really going inside of the public sector, because even the Italian bourgeoisie, they are already saying, when this corona crisis is over and when the public spending has to go down again, it is clear that austerity will be the measures that the state has to push forward. So I think it is really very hard when we look at the governments all over Europe, that there are progressive forces inside of the governments trying to strengthen like public services against private interests.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maurizio. I am not sure whether Olli followed any of this, or whether Olli would like to say something, or whether you'd rather call it. Should we try it? Can you speak, Olli? Oh, we can't hear you. No, still no. It doesn't seem to be working. Let's see if we can unmute you somehow. No, it doesn't seem to be working. Okay. So yeah, it seems from here that it's actually a microphone issue on your end. So that's tricky for us to solve. I want to thank all of you who have been joining us this afternoon. I think the discussion is far from over. I think there's lots more to talk about, lots more to learn. I want to thank the speakers, but I also definitely want to thank the participants who raised some very interesting and inspiring questions. I think we will actually, I know that we will have more webinars. We will be talking about the role of women, or what are women facing in this crisis. I think we touched upon this today when we talk about care work, but I think there's a lot more to talk about. And we will also talk about sanctions again, because there's other countries than Cuba and Venezuela that are suffering tremendously under the sanctions, and even more so during the current crisis. Okay, I want to remind you that we're beginning to run the campaign, that the We Sustain the World campaign, and I hope that you will join us again for webinars, or in our regular meetings, or in some of the campaigns for sure. Thank you very, very much, Olli. Thank you, Maurizio. Thank you, Nerea.
Thank you very much.
And thanks everyone else. Goodbye.
Bye.